September 7, 1942. Blackett Strait, Western Solomons. Midnight has already passed, but the sea is still awake. A humid wind drifts across the water, carrying the smell of burnt jungle from distant battles on Guadalcanal. The moon is only a thin slice in the sky, just enough to glint off the slow-moving shadows of a Japanese resupply convoy creeping south toward Kalambangara. 4 barges. 1 small freighter. A thin escort, for the Imperial Navy believes nothing in these waters can challenge them tonight. They are wrong. A low rumble hums across the strait, too small for a destroyer, too fast for a barge. Lieutenant Commander Tsunetaro Tsurumi, squinting from the deck of the escorting subchaser CH-22, raises his binoculars. At first he sees nothing but the dark, glassy water. Then, a flicker. A spark. A faint white wake slicing the black surface. He scoffs quietly. American toy boats, he mutters to his XO, repeating the joke that has circulated among Japanese officers since the first reports of these strange craft appeared weeks earlier. Small. Wooden. Lightly armed. Barely armored at all. They were not real combat vessels, the officers insisted, just oversized speedboats with delusions of grandeur. But Tsurumi lowers the binoculars slowly. Something feels wrong. Out ahead, 2 shadows skim across the water at nearly 40 knots, engines snarling just above idle, hulls dancing atop the waves. The boats seem to whisper through the darkness, their silhouettes nearly invisible, except when a wave crashes just right, throwing mist over their bows. Patrol torpedo boats. PT-109 and PT-122. American Mosquito craft entering the kill zone. On PT-109, Lieutenant Junior Grade John Kennedy, thin, focused, shirt sleeves rolled, leans forward from the cockpit. His crew is tense, listening to every vibration of the Packard engines behind them. The night is their element. Their only protection is speed, and the shadows. The Japanese convoy is exactly where intelligence said it would be. Kennedy lifts his hand, and the crew immediately throttles down. The sound fades to a growl. You can almost feel the tension tightening in your chest as the boat creeps closer. On the horizon, the black outline of the freighter grows larger. Kennedy whispers. Torpedoes, stand by. His crew hunches over the Mark 8 tubes, checking latches, wiping fog from the lenses, waiting for the order. Across the strait, Lieutenant Commander Tsurumi finally recognizes the danger as a second pair of wakes materialize behind the first. 4 boats. Coming from the south. And probably more behind them. The toy boats are multiplying. He snaps orders to the crew of CH-22. Searchlights begin to crank upward. Machine guns are manned. Engines roar. But it's too late. Kennedy's eyes lock on the convoy. The range is closing. The freighter is just large enough for a clean silhouette, a perfect torpedo target in the dark. He lowers his hand. Fire 1. A sharp hiss. A flash of compressed air. A white trail streaks across the water, straight toward the Japanese hull. Tsurumi sees it instantly. Torpedo! Torpedo port side. The convoy erupts into motion, barges scattering, searchlights stabbing the darkness, gunners firing blindly at invisible silhouettes on the waves. But the PT boats are already twisting away, throttles slammed forward, engines screaming as they vanish into the night mist. Seconds later, a thunderous roar shatters the strait. A column of water and flame rises from the side of the Japanese freighter. And the Imperial Navy's officers learn, for the first time, that the American toy boats are very real, and very deadly. The explosion's echo rolls across Blackett Strait, bouncing off the jungle-covered cliffs of Kalambangara and New Georgia. For several seconds, no one speaks, neither on the Japanese ships nor the American PT boats fleeing into the darkness. The only sound is the angry hiss of steam pouring from the freighter's ruptured boilers. Lieutenant Commander Tsurumi grips the rail of CH-22, knuckles white. How could a tiny wooden boat, barely larger than a fishing craft, slip through an Imperial Navy convoy, fire torpedoes, and escape untouched? The answer is still racing away at 40 knots. On PT-109, Kennedy shouts over the roar of the Packard engines. "Hard starboard. Keep low." Tracer rounds zip overhead, stitching the water where the boat had been seconds earlier. The Japanese searchlights finally sweep across the strait, but the PT boats are ghosts, hugging the shoreline, using the blackness of the jungle to vanish. Behind them, chaos reigns. The freighter lists sharply, smoke pouring from a ragged wound cut deep into its hull. Barges peel off in every direction. The subchaser zigzags wildly, trying to pursue the PT boats, but every time a light sweeps across the water, the Americans are already gone, just a fading echo of engine thunder. The Japanese officers can hardly believe what they're seeing. Earlier that year, staff officers at Rabaul laughed when reports claimed American PT boats had attempted attacks. "Impossible," they said. The Imperial Navy, the most experienced night fighting force in the world, would never be threatened by tiny plywood nuisances. And yet here they are, forced into evasive maneuvers by craft so small they barely register on optical rangefinders. Meanwhile, the PT boats regroup behind a rocky inlet on the southern end of the strait. Engines cut. Darkness swallows them once again. Kennedy moves through the cockpit, checking his crew. Everyone still breathing? A few laughs. A few coughs. But they're alive. The smell of fuel and cordite still hangs in the air. Across from PT-109 sits PT-122, commanded by Lieutenant Edward S. Hall. He pulls alongside, keeping only a red flashlight visible, shielded from the Japanese. "You hit something?" he asks quietly. Kennedy nods. "Freighter. Looked like a supply ship. Big one." Hall lets out a low whistle. The PT crews have known frustration for weeks, torpedoes that misfire, engines that overheat, and enemy destroyers that are simply too fast. But tonight? Tonight felt different. Tonight the boats had teeth. Back in the strait, Tsurumi stares at the burning freighter, each passing second revealing more of the damage. His crew looks to him for orders, but he hesitates. The enemy they mocked has just proved it can cripple a convoy without warning. He finally growls. "Signal Rabaul. Inform them we were attacked by multiple American, motor torpedo boats." The words feel ridiculous. But the evidence is right in front of him. Within hours, that message ripples through Japanese command, and disbelief begins to crack. Some officers insist the damage must have come from aircraft. Others claim it was sabotage. But eyewitnesses repeat the same detail. Fast boats. Small silhouettes. 2 torpedoes launched at close range. The Imperial Navy, once confident in its night supremacy, now has a new enemy lurking in the shadows, one it cannot see, cannot predict, and cannot easily destroy. And over the next weeks, these toy boats will return. Again. And again. And again. Each time, bolder. Each time, closer. The Japanese will soon realize the truth: the Americans have weaponized speed, stealth, and the night itself. 2 weeks later, September 23, 1942. Vela Gulf. Midnight presses down like a weight. Even the waves seem to hold their breath. A thin fog slinks across the surface of the water as 5 Japanese Daihatsu landing barges, heavily laden with ammunition, fuel drums, and crates of rice, push northward. Their engines rumble steadily, churning the dark water as they hug the coastline. The crews move calmly, convinced the worst is behind them. The earlier attack had been dismissed by most officers at Rabaul as an anomaly, an unlikely stroke of luck by American novices. After all, how many torpedoes could these mosquito craft carry? How many crews were trained to operate them? How long could flimsy wooden hulls survive in waters patrolled by destroyers? The Japanese commanders assure themselves. The Americans cannot sustain these attacks. But out in the mist, hidden between 2 jagged reef lines, the Americans are already waiting. PT-59, PT-44, PT-46, and PT-48 sit silently, engines idling at barely a murmur. Their crews watch the shoreline with a predatory stillness. They know the route. They know the speed. And tonight, they intend to cut the convoy to pieces. Lieutenant Clifford Bud Ainsworth aboard PT-46 checks his watch. Midnight plus 4 minutes. Exactly when scouts said the Japanese barges would appear. He leans toward his bow gunner. Quiet now. We wait until they're nearly on top of us. The men nod. Every PT sailor knows the rule: never fight fair. They are outgunned, out-armored, and one lucky shell could shatter their boat like matchwood. Their only advantages are surprise, speed, and the night. A faint sound drifts through the fog, low engines, steady. The Japanese barges are approaching. Ainsworth raises his hand. Engines shift from idle to a soft growl. The PT boats slowly creep forward, hidden by the curtain of mist hugging the coastline. Then, a column of dark shapes emerges. Even through the fog, the silhouettes of the Daihatsu barges are unmistakable: low, boxy, slow-moving platforms stacked with crates and gear. Good targets. Perfect targets. Ainsworth breathes deeply. "All right, boys," he whispers. "Let's hit them fast. Let's hit them hard." He drops his hand. The Packard engines erupt. The PT boats surge forward, spray exploding from their bows as they cut across the Japanese column. The startled barge crews shout orders, scrambling to their machine guns. Muzzles flash wildly in the night, bullets spitting in every direction. But they are slow, too slow. On PT-46, the forward twin .50 calories thunder to life, their tracers ripping through canvas covers and fuel drums stacked atop the first barge. Flames blossom instantly, licking upward as ammunition cooks off and shrapnel sprays into the night. PT-44 swings wide, launching a torpedo at the second barge in line. At such short range, accuracy is almost guaranteed. The torpedo slices through the shallow waves and slams into the barge's flank with a blinding flash, tearing the boat apart in a fountain of water and splintered wood. Across the column, the Japanese return fire with frantic intensity. Green tracers streak over the water, hissing past PT hulls, punching into the sea with violent pops. Ainsworth's boat banks sharply. "You missed, you bastards," his stern gunner yells, squeezing the trigger again. The .50 cal rakes the deck of a third barge, sending Japanese soldiers diving behind crates. Boxes burst open, rice spraying across the deck like snow. For the Japanese, the shock is total. The barges are too slow to outrun the PT boats, too lightly armed to challenge them, and too vulnerable to the torpedoes ripping into their sides. Their only hope is to scatter. And scatter they do. The surviving barges veer toward the reef line, trying to use the shallow water as protection. PT boats dare not chase too close, coral heads could shear off a propeller in an instant. But the Americans have another weapon. The 20mm Oerlikon cannon. PT-48 swings broadside, its 20mm chattering like an angry saw. Explosive rounds tear through the hull of a fleeing barge, shredding its engine housing. A plume of smoke erupts, and the barge drifts helplessly toward the breakers. Within minutes, the convoy is destroyed, burning, sinking, drifting wreckage dotting the fog-covered water like dying fireflies. The PT boats regroup, engines purring as they make a slow circle. The glow of the burning barges reflects across the waves, casting flickering light on their wet decks. Ainsworth scans the devastation. 4 barges confirmed destroyed. The last one crippled. His crew virtually unharmed. A quiet grin forms on his face. Not out of arrogance, out of realization. The tide is shifting. For the first time, the US PT squadrons have turned a night resupply mission into a complete disaster for the Japanese. And as word spreads across the Solomons, Imperial commanders begin to panic. Reports from Rabaul now call the PT boats persistent, dangerous, and increasingly effective. Some officers recommend larger escorts. Others propose heavier guns on barges. But none of their solutions will be fast enough. Because the Americans have only just begun the night war. October 1942, Rabaul Naval Headquarters. A humid storm rattles the tin roof as senior Japanese officers gather around a long table littered with maps of the Solomons. Cigarette smoke coils toward the ceiling. The room feels tense, strained, because the latest dispatches have arrived. And each one tells the same story. More barges lost. More convoys hit. More PT attacks. Rear Admiral Reizo Tanaka, the famed transport admiral, scans the reports, jaw tight. He has ferried men through naval gunfire, aircraft strikes, and submarine ambushes. But these American mosquito boats, these pathetic plywood nuisances, are proving far more disruptive than anyone expected. He slams a fist onto the table. They are not warships, he growls. They are speedboats. Why are they cutting through our convoys? A junior officer clears his throat. Sir, the men say they attack at night, without warning. They are too small to detect until it is too late. Another officer adds. And they are fast. Faster than our barges. Faster than even our destroyers at close quarters. Tanaka's eyes narrow. He hated the sound of that. Someone else mutters. Perhaps they are guided by aircraft? Or coastal radar? Speculations swirl, but none provide comfort. Finally, Captain Toshihide Sanjima, commander of the Tokyo Express destroyer runs, steps forward and places a finger on the map. They lurk here, he says. Blackett Strait. Vela Gulf. The Slot. Shallow water. Reef lines. Our destroyers cannot maneuver. Barges are too slow. And they wait in the shadows like thieves. The room falls silent. The Americans are using the geography like a weapon. Sanjima continues. If we cannot outrun them, and we cannot avoid them, we must kill them. He proposes a new directive. Destroy PT bases. Hunt PT squadrons aggressively. Install heavier guns on barges. Improve night lookouts. And above all, never assume the strait is safe again. Tanaka hates the idea of devoting destroyers to chasing tiny wooden boats. But he cannot ignore the reports. Convoys delayed. Supplies lost. Troops stranded on starving islands. The toy boats are threatening the entire logistical chain. He reluctantly gives the order. Deploy destroyers to sweep the straits nightly. Set ambushes. Light the entire coastline if needed. Find their bases. But even as he speaks, another attack is already unfolding hundreds of miles away. That same night, New Georgia Sound, the Slot. The moon hides behind thick clouds. Waves slap against the hull of PT-137, commanded by Lieutenant Anthony W. Layton. His boat moves at a slow patrol glide, barely disturbing the water. To the untrained eye, the sea looks empty. But Layton knows what to listen for. A faint mechanical hum drifts across the sound. Not the deep rumble of a destroyer. Not the clatter of a freighter. The steady, low chug of diesel. Barges. Layton signals his crew. The Packard engines spool up, growling, vibrating the narrow deck beneath their boots. They angle toward the sound like wolves tracking a wounded deer. Minutes later, dark shapes rise out of the gloom. A long line of Japanese supply barges, dozens of them, packed with crates and soldiers, pushing slowly toward Kalimbangara. Their crews hunch low, keeping lanterns dim, praying the night keeps them hidden. It does not. Layton gives a whisper of an order. Gunners. Ready. The PT boats strike as a pack, fanning out, splitting the column, each one firing in a synchronized storm. The night lights up. PT-137's bow guns tear into the lead barge, riddling its engine block and setting it ablaze. PT-162 strafes the center of the column, cutting gun crews apart before they can return fire. PT-159 launches two torpedoes that streak through the barge formation like underwater lightning. A Japanese officer on the middle barge tries to rally his men. Fire! Fire! Sweep the waterlines! But the PT boats are already moving, circling, weaving, slipping through gaps, hitting from new angles every 30 seconds. The barges fire wildly, tracers crisscrossing, but every burst illuminates more of the American boats darting just out of reach. 3 barges explode. 2 drift helplessly toward the reef. 1 capsizes as its cargo shifts violently under heavy fire. The Japanese survivors scramble into the water, clinging to crates and debris, staring in disbelief at the sleek silhouettes racing away at impossible speed. Less than 10 minutes later, the strait is silent again, except for the crackle of burning wood. The toy boats have vanished. By morning, shattered barges wash ashore like broken shells. The Japanese count the losses and realize a truth they had refused to accept. The American PT boats are no longer a nuisance. They are a strategic threat. And Japan has no easy answer. November 1942, Solomon Islands, multiple locations. The war in the Pacific has shifted beneath the waves and the night sky. The Japanese Navy, once confident in its dominance, is now reacting, scrambling to patch holes in supply lines, fortify barges, and deploy destroyers as convoy escorts. But the PT boats continue to haunt every mission. On PT-109, now docked in a hidden cove near Rendova, Lieutenant John Kennedy surveys his crew. Their faces are streaked with soot, sweat, and salt from the last 2 months of non-stop night raids. Each operation has been a gamble, but the risk is worth it. The Japanese supply chain is bleeding, and Allied forces on Guadalcanal are finally gaining breathing room. Kennedy rubs his temples and looks toward the strait. The faint glow of fires from sunken barges flickers on the horizon, a silent, warning beacon to any Japanese commander foolish enough to send another convoy. In contrast, at Rabaul, Rear Admiral Reizo Tanaka stares at maps with beads of sweat on his brow. Every report of another night raid forces him to rewrite plans, pull destroyers from frontline duties, and reconsider long-held assumptions about what constitutes a threat at sea. It is not just nuisance craft, Tanaka mutters. They are lightning strikes. The Japanese begin to implement radical changes. Convoys are rerouted, sometimes through dangerous reef-strewn passages. Night escorts are doubled. Anti-PT defensive nets are attempted, though often too late. Coastal watch posts are extended, yet PT crews exploit every blind spot. But the PT boats are faster, smaller, and smarter than the hastily assembled countermeasures. Every attempt to intercept them ends with frustration, a few tracers, a missed torpedo, a burning barge, and then silence. December 2, 1942, New Georgia Sound. The fog curls low over the water. On PT-159, Lieutenant Anthony Layton squints through a light drizzle. They've intercepted another Japanese resupply column, but this time it's larger, 6 barges, escorted by a destroyer and a subchaser. A high-stakes gamble. Layton signals his squad. Form up. We hit hard, hit fast, and vanish. As the American PT boats fan out, the destroyer turns in slow arcs, searching. Spotlights sweep the waves. Japanese gunners fire wild bursts of machine gun fire. Explosions bloom on the first barges. Torpedoes streak silently across the water, cracking into their targets with devastating precision. By the time the destroyer zeroes in, the PTs have already slipped between reef lines and shadows, engines nearly silent, leaving behind only burning wreckage. For every convoy the Japanese send, the PTs teach them one lesson: speed, stealth, and audacity can make even the smallest boat a deadly weapon. The psychological impact is enormous. Stories of PT attacks ripple through the Japanese ranks. Officers whisper of wooden demons striking at night, undermining their logistics, killing crews, and leaving no trace. Morale dips among barge crews, who now fear every shadow, every ripple, every whisper of a Packard engine. For the Americans, the raids are a symbol of ingenuity and courage: wooden hulls, fast engines, daring crews, and the ability to operate under impossible conditions, sometimes in enemy-infested waters, often without backup. Each successful night raid feeds a legend, inspiring more volunteers, more daring operations, and ultimately contributing to the broader Allied strategy in the Solomons. By the end of 1942, Japanese commanders concede privately what they cannot say publicly. The small, toy PT boats are no longer toys. They are a real, persistent, and devastating threat. Every shipment lost, every convoy delayed, every freighter burned is a reminder that war can be decided not only by massive ships or overwhelming firepower, but by small, fast, daring craft under the cover of darkness, and the men brave enough to command them. The Solomons will never be the same. From the burning straits to the secret coves, the night belongs to the PT boats. And the Imperial Navy has learned the hard way, mocking them was a fatal mistake.